Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into something that I think we've all experienced at some point, and that's the feeling of being stuck. You know that feeling, right? Where you're trying to move forward with a project or make a decision, but it feels like you're slogging through mud.
Absolutely. That feeling of being stuck is something most of us are all too familiar with. And it can be incredibly frustrating, can't it? It's like you're hitting a wall, and every path you consider seems to just lead to more dead ends.
Yeah, exactly. And, in preparing for this deep dive, I was reading this really interesting article by Tony Feghali, and one thing that really stood out to me was his point that often the problem isn't necessarily that we're on the wrong path, but that we're just thinking about it in a way that's, well, he calls it foggy.
Right. And that really resonated with me too. It's like our minds are clouded and we can't see the way forward clearly. So instead of trying to come up with some radical new strategy or making a huge change, maybe what we really need is a way to clear that mental fog, you
Right.
know?
Totally. And Fagali suggests that what we need in those moments isn't some big new idea, but rather a set of questions, almost like a flashlight to cut through that fog.
That's such a great analogy, a flashlight. Because these questions aren't about finding something completely new. They're about illuminating what's already there, but hidden from view.
And I love that. So in this deep dive, we're going to be exploring those three key questions that Fagali lays out in his article. We're going to really break them down, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll have some practical tools that you can use to get unstuck and start moving forward again.
I'm excited to dig into this. And the first question is so simple, yet so powerful.
Yeah, tell me about it. It's what decision am I avoiding? Yeah. It seems almost too basic, right? But there's so much packed into it.
Right, because as humans, we're really good at starting things. We get
Yeah.
excited about new projects, we jump in with enthusiasm, but
But
then,
then when we hit a snag or when it's time to make a tough call, we can kind of stall out. It's almost like we instinctively avoid those big important decisions.
yeah, and I think Fagali is spot on when he says that often, that avoidance is the root cause of feeling stuck. It's like there's this decision lurking in the back of our minds, and we know we need to make it, but we keep putting it off, hoping it'll just magically resolve itself or something.
I've been there so many times. It's painful. And he gives some great examples, right? Like, what if you've hired someone who's just not working out? Or maybe you've got a product that's not performing as well as you hoped.
Or even a partnership that's draining your energy instead of fueling you, right?
Yeah, and I bet most of us listening can think of at least one situation in our own lives where we're putting off a difficult conversation or a necessary change. And what's so interesting is that often we're not even fully aware that we're doing it. We tell ourselves we're still thinking it over or waiting for the right time, but really we're just avoiding that tough decision.
Exactly. We create this illusion of progress by staying busy, but we're not actually addressing the root of the problem. And what Fagali highlights so well is that this avoidance isn't necessarily laziness. It's often a way of protecting ourselves, right? We're afraid of making the wrong choice, of facing discomfort, or even failing.
It's so true, and it makes total sense. But by avoiding the decision, we're actually prolonging that feeling of being stuck. We're keeping ourselves in that muddy, unclear place.
And so the first step to getting unstuck is to just name the decision, right? Acknowledge it, write it down, give it a deadline. That simple act can be so powerful because it brings it out of the shadows and forces us to confront it.
I love that. It's like you're shining that flashlight right on the thing that's been tripping you up.
Exactly. And once you've identified the decision you're avoiding, you can start to work through it in a more deliberate way.
Okay, now this next question is one that I find so insightful, and I think it can be really helpful in those situations where fear is holding us back.
Oh, yeah, the what if I wasn't afraid question, right?
Yeah.
This one is a game changer.
So the question is, if I'm not afraid of the outcome, what would I do next? And I love how this question cuts through all the noise and gets right to the heart of the matter. Because often our fear is what's keeping us stuck.
Oh, 100%. Fear can be so insidious, can't it? It shows up in so many sneaky ways. It might be overthinking every little detail, worrying about what other people will think, or constantly chasing external validation.
Or maybe it's clinging to old habits and routines, even when we know they're not working for us anymore, simply because they feel safe and familiar.
Totally. That comfort zone can be so tempting, even when it's holding us back. And so, this question, if I'm not afraid, what would I do next? It allows us to bypass all those fears and tap into our inner wisdom. It helps us to connect with what we truly want and what we know deep down is the right thing to do.
So I want you listening to really think about this for a moment. If you could set aside all your fears and worries, what action would you take? What change would you make?
What would your next step be if you knew you couldn't fail? And Feghali gives some really great examples of the kinds of answers that might come up when we ask ourselves this question.
Yeah, he talks about things like simplifying your offerings, having a difficult conversation, taking a break, or even raising your prices.
Things that we might be hesitant to do because we're afraid of the potential consequences, right?
Exactly. But when we remove that fear from the equation, it can be so freeing. It allows us to see possibilities that we might have otherwise missed.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that this question isn't about ignoring our fears completely. It's about acknowledging them, understanding where they're coming from, and then making a conscious choice about whether they're serving us or holding us back.
And sometimes, just by naming those fears, we can start to diminish their power over us.
It's like shining a light on them, right? And suddenly they're not so scary anymore.
Okay, ready for the third question. This one is all about finding a sense of ease and alignment in our work.
Yeah, I love this one. What would make this feel lighter?
It's such a great question, isn't it? And Feghali talks about how when something feels heavy or slow or even joyless, it's often a sign that we're out of sync with ourselves in some way.
It's like there's this misalignment, right? Maybe we're doing too much, spreading ourselves too thin, or trying to please everyone but ourselves.
Or maybe we're stuck in old ways of working that are no longer serving us. Those routines and habits that once felt helpful, but now just feel like a burden.
Totally. And this question invites us to take a step back and ask ourselves, how can I make this feel lighter? How can I bring more ease and joy into this work? And he gives some fantastic examples of what that might look like.
Yeah, like simplifying complex processes, building a team based on trust, reclaiming your time by cutting out unnecessary meetings.
Or aligning your work more closely with your strengths and passions, right?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
It's about finding that sweet spot where your work feels both meaningful and energizing. And I love how Feghali connects this idea of lighter to being true to you.
Yes, because when we're operating in a way that's authentic to who we are, things just tend to flow more naturally.
Our decisions become clearer, we're more efficient, and we actually enjoy the process.
It's not about taking the easy way out. It's about finding a way of working that feels sustainable and fulfilling.
So, to wrap up, when we're feeling stuck, it's so easy to get caught up in trying to find that one big solution, that magic bullet that will solve all our problems. But what Feghali reminds us is that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is to simply pause, take a breath, and ask ourselves the right questions.
It's about turning inward, listening to our own inner wisdom, and then taking action based on what we hear.
Exactly. So let's recap those three key questions. What decision am I avoiding? If I'm not afraid of the outcome, what would I do next? And what would make this feel lighter?
I encourage you to take some time with these questions. Write them down, really reflect on them, and see what comes up. You might be surprised by the insights you discover.
And one final thought to leave you with. Think about how incorporating these kinds of introspective questions into your regular routine could transform your approach to challenges and decision-making in the long run. It's about developing that habit of self-reflection so that you can not only get unstuck, but also stay on a path that feels aligned and fulfilling.
It's like having that inner compass, always guiding you forward, no matter what obstacles you encounter along the way.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive, and we'll see you next time.
See you then.